what is the difference between adding a reference and giving using? That is the last topic that we are talking about. So can someone explain to me in .NET, what is the difference between adding a reference and giving using? Would someone like to answer that? Yes. In .NET, what is the difference between adding a reference and giving using? Come on.
So,
yes. Who's this?
This is Devi, sir.
Yes, Devi, go ahead.
When we are giving the reference, we are just including that library into our program. And when we use using, even if we don't write that library name, the compiler will understand from which library we are calling the function.
Correct.
If we are not using, we should mention the library name also.
Correct. Absolutely correct. Well said.
Thank you.
All right. I'll give you another example of this. Let me, just so that you all are not confused on this. Like, for example, now I have a reference here to system.data. Okay. So this one has been added for me by, automatically by default. Now I have a class here called system.data.dataset. Okay, there's an inbuilt class out here. All right, so let's assume I declare a reference of that type. Now this is working fine. Now why is this working fine? Why does this work fine? Because I already have a reference out here. So I have added a reference to system.data. Therefore, I'm able to use system.data.dataset. Now, what if I give only dataset? Will this work? Is this going to work now?
Yes, sir.
Why is this not working? I'm saying only dataset. So why is this not working?
Using system.data.
Correct. Because here it looks out for a class called dataset under the current class or under the current namespace or in the using directives. Nisha ma'am, we are allowing them today. Tomorrow onwards we want. Okay.
Okay, sir. Yeah.
So you go ahead and please allow them today.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
With a warning, you all know what I do. Okay,
Yes,
these
sir.
people don't. So yeah, fair warning to everybody. I don't allow people once the session has started. Okay. So please log in at least 2-3 minutes before. Yeah, coming back to this dataset DS, because I'm not giving system.data.dataset is causing me a problem. Now, how do I eliminate the problem? Either I write system.data.dataset or what do I do? Using system.data. In this case, now it's allowing me to work with that. What is the other way of doing it? If that error is coming, what else could I have done?
Data.dataset.
No, yes, but how does Visual Studio help me? Go down there and you just type out you select the using system.data, so it generates that for you. So this would now work. Okay, using system.data would work. But if my reference was not there, will this work? Even if I give system.data using system.data, will it still work if I don't have a reference? Yes, my question to you all is, supposing I don't have a reference, if I remove the reference and I'm giving using system.data, then will this still work? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
No, sir. No, sir.
No, sir.
No, sir.
No, it won't. So this is what the difference is between Java and .NET. In Java, only one place you needed to give imports and everything worked okay. In .NET, that is not the case. You have to first add a reference and then you can make using, which is a shorter way of doing it. So if I remove this reference, let's say I remove this. Okay, I removed system.data. Now this is giving me an error immediately. Even if I've given using system.data, it will not matter. Why? Because you don't have the library of system.data in case. Are we clear on this? So nothing that I do here will make it work. Nothing that I do here will make it work. So what are the prerequisite now? What would I need to do first?
We should have to add reference.
Add a reference. And how do I add a reference? Right click on references, add a reference. System.data would be in the .NET assemblies. So look in the .NET assemblies for system.data and select this, and that's how you add a reference. And now this would work. Not that I need a data set right now. I'm just trying to explain to you how this works. Right? So hopefully this is clear. Yes? Any questions? All right. Okay. So this is where we had stopped off last time round. I'm continuing in the same project. I'm going to be writing or creating another class, public class, class 1, right? In which I have a method which I want you all to call.
Didi.
Turn off your mic, please, and you are not focusing on the session. Please focus on the session. So console.writeLine display card. So my simple question to you is, how do I go and call this display? From main, how do I go and call display? What do I need to do to call display? Yes, help me please.
Class 1.display.
Class 1.display.
Create object.
Class 1.display would have worked if it was a static method. So if it's not a static method, what do you need to do?
Create object from that class.
Correct. You need to first create an object of that class and then call that method. So help me with this. Now, I don't want to remove main. I don't want to change any of this code because this is what I tried with you all first. So I just want to, sort of show you all what I did first, what I did second. I don't want to remove this code. So what my habit is, what I keep doing is I make a copy of this main and I will write down the code in the second one. Now, right now it's going to give me an error. Why is it giving me an error?
Two main methods.
Two main methods. So this is not going to be allowed. So what I do is this earlier main, I call it main 1. So it's no longer main. And this main now I'll write code in here. So what will run is main. And this is what I had written down earlier. So when you are looking at my code later, you will see main 1, main 2, main 3, main 4, main 5. That means main 1 was what I tried first. Main 2 was what I tried second. Main 3 was what I tried third, and so on and so forth. Okay. All right. So help me with this, please. We wanted to call display. So class 1 O. What is O here?
Object reference of class 1.
Of type class 1. Right? And then allocate memory for O. O is equal to new class 1. All right. What is new class 1? What is new class 1? It is an object of class 1. And O is now pointing to it. Right? Okay. After which, of course, what do I do? O dot, and I can call it display. Now, in addition to display, display is shown to me. But in addition to display, I'm getting 4 other methods. I'm getting equals, get hash code, get type, and toString. So any guesses why I'm getting that method? A lot of the concepts will be similar to Java. So you can use those concepts and answer. Why am I getting those methods?
Methods of parent class.
So what is the parent class?
Object.
Object. So here in .NET as well, any class that you create, any class, by default inherits from the object class. And these 4 methods that you see, you'll see these methods everywhere. Equals, get hash code, get type, and toString. So these are methods that have been defined in the object class. So in addition to my display, I'm also getting these object class methods. So I don't want those methods. I want only the display method. And this is how you would call that. Somebody suggested class one dot display. What will class one dot show you? What will this show you? These will be all the static methods of that class. So please don't make such fundamental errors. All right, let's try calling this code and code dot display. The read line, as usual, I'm keeping it so that it waits for me. Okay. Can we combine these into a single line? Can we combine these into a single line? What do we do here in this case? Class 1 O is equal to
New class 1.
new class 1. So the reason why I purposely put in this in separate lines, because I wanted to be aware that O is actually a reference and new class 1 is the object. But you all those who did answered me correctly. So I'm very happy that you know the difference between the reference and the object. All right. Of course, you can combine the two lines here. And remember, this O is not an object. O is a reference. All right. You could have called it in this manner also. O dot display. Right. All right. What is function overloading? What is function overloading?
And there are two methods with same name.
Same method name.
And
Same name, but something needs to be different, no?
Number of
parameters.
parameters.
Different
Method
argument.
is different. Yeah. Parameters are different. So here I'm going to try function overloading. There were two functions having the same name, display and display. But in the second case, the parameters are different. So I could do this and display an S. While calling the method, how do I call it? O dot display. You'll find that now there are two overloads to this. I mean, one which doesn't take any parameters and one which takes a string as a parameter. Right? If I had to call this, both of these could get called. Right? These are all concepts that you are familiar with, correct? So I'm going a little quick on this. If you have a question, then ask me. Slow me down with the question if you are not understanding anything. All right. Let's take this situation. Let's say I had a function called add, which took some parameters. Let's say int a, comma, int b, comma, int c, for example. Right? And this returned a plus b plus c. Now, to call the function, let's call that function. Sorry, this one here. Let me do it this way. Int answer is equal to, right, O dot add. And I could actually pass different values to it, 10, 20, 30. I could do that. And console.writeLine answer. Right? Okay. Now, what if I wanted it to work with two parameters as well? What else could I do out here? One possibility is what? I could write one more function and which takes what? It takes two parameters. So instead of passing three parameters, you can pass two. And what are we doing here in this case? What is this an example of?
Function overloading.
Function overloading. Now you can achieve the same result as function overloading without creating a second function. So without creating a second function, you can actually create the same result by using optional parameters. Right? So now look at this. I've given an optional parameter out here. C here is an optional parameter. What do I mean by an optional parameter? While calling that method, you need not pass C to it. So you could pass it either, A and B only, or A, B, and C. Both options are possible. If I call it in this way, right? If I call it in this way, then this would work. What will happen in this case? When you say, in this case it's pretty clear. 10, 20, 30. What is it going to do here in this case? 10 will be A, B will be 20, and C will be 30. What about the second case? What happens now? A and B are 10 and 20. What happens to C?
0.
C is equal to 0. 0.
Since you have not passed it, it will take the value that you're given as a default parameter. So here in this case, C would be taken as the value of 0. And of course, from my calculation purpose, it doesn't make a difference. So it will be 10 plus 20 plus 0. So if you notice here, I have also, it's like function overloading without having to create a second function. What am I doing here in this case? I'm writing one function only, but having optional parameters. Are we clear on this, everybody? What if I give
Yes, sir.
all optional? What if I give all of them as optional? How many different ways can I call this function? In how many different ways?
Four different.
Yes, sir.
Perfect.
It's 4 ways.
What are the 4 ways? One with 3 parameters, one with 2 parameters, one with 1 parameter, or one with 0 parameters. Right? Let's try doing this. So let's quickly just simply. So 3, 2, 1, or 0. Sorry. In this case, when you're calling it like this, what are if you're not passing it anything, all 3 of them would take a value of 0. Are we clear on this? So you're achieving, function overloading like features with what? With
Default parameter.
Default
argument.
Supposing I had not used default arguments and I had to use function overloading here. How many times would I have to write this function without using default parameters? How many times would I need to write it?
4 times.
4 times. Right? So which would you prefer? Would you prefer function overloading or would you prefer default parameters?
Default parameter.
Right? Optional parameters or default parameters. So default parameters are shortening your code, right? Instead of having to write it 4 different times, you're writing it only once and you can call it in 4 different ways. So remember that when you are next time when you are trying to overload a function, you can actually do the same thing in a different way. Instead of having multiple overloads of a function, use default parameters. All right, now we tried this before. This would work, right? This would work. We had tried this. This is the first thing that we tried. What does this say? A must be passed, B must be passed, but C is optional. C need not be passed. What if I do it the reverse way? What if I try doing it this way? Why does it protest? Why does it give you an error?
So default parameter should be at the end of the argument.
Why? Correct. You're correct. I'm asking you why.
Sir, when we pass any, yes, sir, when we pass any argument, it takes A and convert it in 0. Suppose, sir, I pass 2 and that 2 is goes to the A and A is equal to 0.
Okay. So I'm not
But
sure
we are not
whether
able to set the position of it.
Reference.
the problem in this situation is you're saying that the first is optional and second must be passed. But now how do you go to the second one without passing the first one? It's not possible to do so. How do you pass the second parameter without passing the first? When you try writing the second parameter, that will be taken as the first parameter. So something like this is not logically correct. Therefore, you cannot do this. So any default parameters that you're giving, any optional parameters that you're giving, they have to start from the end. They can be the rightmost one can be default, and then you can go towards the left. So right to left is okay, but left to right is not okay. So when you're in the lab, you can actually try out, playing around with this. How you can give it from right to left, but not left to right. Right? Okay, so these were default parameters, and these were, of course, the first one was function overloading. This one is using optional arguments with default values. All right, we're just have you figured out my pattern, what I'm doing? Every time I'm changing the main, I'm just calling it main 1, main 2, main 3. So you can see my older code, but it doesn't, I'm not changing any of that code. Then I'm going and changing any of this. All right. Now, when you write code like this, okay, and you pass parameters based on the order in which they apply or appear. These are what are known as positional parameters. So what do I mean by positional parameters? That the first parameter, what is the first parameter here in this case? 10 would go into the first parameter that you have here. So what is the first parameter here? 10 goes into A. The second parameter, the parameter in the second position goes into the parameter here, the second parameter here, which is B. And the third one goes in here as C. So these are what are referred to as positional parameters. Now, instead of using the position of the parameter, right? Instead of using the position of the parameter, see what I'm doing out here. I'm saying C:30. C:30. So where am I giving this parameter? This is the first parameter. This is the first parameter. But this first parameter will not go into A. Where is it going into? C. Right? Now, in such a case, I'm using what are known as named parameters. Right? In a named parameter, as the name suggests, what are we using out here? We're using the name of the parameter. So we're saying C:, and C:, here is the name of the parameter. Are we clear on this? What about A and B?
0, 0.
0 and 0. So you can do it this way. Let me take other variations. Now this can be in any order. From a B:20, let's say. So A would be in this case 0.
0.
All right. I mean, you can play around in whatever order. I mean, I'm not now specifying this A:10. So what will happen now? A:10, B:20, and C is 0. So now any permutations, combinations are possible. Right? Any permutation combination is possible with name parameters. With positional parameters, you're fixed. You're giving it based on how they are appearing in there. But name parameters, on the other hand, are doing what? You can give it in any order. Now, what would happen if? Tell me what would happen if, let's say, I did not use optional parameters. Let's say C only was optional, other two are not optional. Why do you think it's giving an error here? Why do you think it's giving an error here?
Those two must pass.
Right? Because what are we saying now? That A and B are compulsory. So by giving C, I cannot eliminate A and B. A and B needs to be passed in any case. So ideally speaking, if you want to work on all possibilities, all permutations, all combinations, then the best way is to combine named parameters with optional parameters, with optional arguments. If you do that, then you get the maximum flexibility. And if you don't do that, then what happens? Then you are forced to pass the values out there. Are we clear on this? So I'll keep it back to the way it was earlier, but you can play around with this again in the lab. What if I don't pass the values? Then you're forced to do this, right? All right. Tell me what I'm doing out here. Okay. Tell me what I'm doing out here. Explain to me what I'm doing out here. Yes.
Combining both of the
So I'm
positional and
using a combination of positional as well as
named
named
parameters.
parameters. So where is the, okay, let me make this as 30 just to distinguish. Where is the first 10 going?
A.
A. What about this one?
C.
C.
C is getting what? 30. What about B?
0.
The optional argument that you have, the default parameter that you have. So you can combine the two, okay, and do it. Let's say, for example, if you had a function that took a lot of parameters, let's say it took 20 parameters. So first two you want to pass, and then you want to pass the 20th one. So first two you can pass as positional, and the last one you can pass as named. Right? So this is what you're working with here in dot. Positional parameters and named parameters. Clear? Questions of any? Yes.
So what if I write C colon 30 first and then 10? So will it take as first parameter or second parameter?
So you tell me now what will happen now. When you do this,
Error.
see what you think it will do.
Error.
So what is it saying now here? Why is it error? Saying C is used out of position, but is followed by an unnamed argument. So the compiler is not able to understand how this would go now. If C was the first this thing, now 10 cannot possibly be, how does it understand? Is it the first parameter? Is it the second parameter? What are you trying to do? So it simply raises his hands and says, sorry, I will not accept this. Right?
Okay, sir.
Okay, now who asked this question?
Kaustubh Bande, sir.
Kaustubh. Okay, so Kaustubh asked this question. Now, just like this, there must be so many combinations, permutations that might be going around in your head when I'm teaching you. I may not cover all possibilities. I might cover only few of them. So here is where your lab time needs to be, spent well. You need to try out all these things. Okay. Get used to trying out different combinations. What if I do this? What if I do that? Right? What if I tried doing this? So I like what you're doing. I like what you're thinking or how you're thinking. That if I did this, then will it work? If I didn't, it might be a very obvious answer, but check it out and see how it works out there. Okay. So that, little bit of, I call it kida. The little kida should be there. What if I did this? What if I did that? Right? Quite often, often I will tell you, no, don't do it this way. The moment I tell you don't do it this way, what should be your first reaction? In the lab, make a note of this and say, okay, what if I try it this way? I'm telling you, don't do it this way. The first thing that you should do is note it down saying, okay, let me try what happens if I do it this way. So get into those sort of habits. Play around with your code. Have fun with your code. Don't just take down the 4 lines of code that I'm giving you and try them out and say, okay, we are done. That's not how you learn coding. You learn coding by experimenting, by trying out new things. Okay, so get comfortable with your code. Enjoy the, the fun that you have out there with the different things that you have. Anyway, coming back to this, let's carry on. Main 3, this is main 3 was I want to call display from main. How do I call display? How do I call display from main? This display here. How do I call that? One
We can write display with parentheses.
directly.
Yes.
Right? So why have I kept it as a static method? What I have, there's a reason why I kept it static. Why?
We don't need to create object.
Correct. Very good. So I want to be able to call from main, I want to call display directly without having to create an object. I can call it directly. So which is the only reason I kept it that way. Okay. Now consider this. What if I had a variable int a equal to 100, let's say? Can I display that value in that display function? Console.writeLine a, can I do that? Is it possible to print this? A function, a value, declared in one function, can it be accessed in the other?
No, sir.
No.
No, sir.
Okay, if you had to make it work, what would be the options? What will you need to do? What changes would you need to make?
Global variable.
One possibility is global variable. Any other possibility?
Pass by value.
Sorry?
Pass by value.
Correct. So you pass it as a parameter to that function. Now in both the cases, you're changing the meaning of the code. By making it global, you're changing the meaning of that variable, meaning lifetime of that variable both. And by passing it as a function parameter, you're changing the meaning of the function. You're changing the signature of the function. So in other words, this cannot be done. Without changing something else, it cannot be done. You cannot int a equal to 0, 100 or whatever. You can't print the value here. But in certain situations that you come across, you may want to do this in .NET. So what do you want to do? You want to have a function, but have the function access a value that is put into the calling code. So how do we get this to work? How do we make this happen out here? Here in .NET, you have the concept of what are known as local functions. Right? So check what I'm doing out here. Instead of writing that, of course, this line doesn't work. So let me remove this line. And instead of writing that outside main, I'm going to write that function within this main function. So when you write such a function like a function within another function, okay, you cannot have an access specifier. So it be just, function name and whatever parameters and return values of it. So let's call this as local func, right? And you do whatever you want in that local func, right? Now, the best part about a local function is that variables that you declare in the outer code can now be accessed in the local function. So what can I do out here now? Console.writeLine a, and this would work. Are we clear on this? Where is this variable declared? Declared inside main. Right? Now, merely writing the function does not mean that it will get called. If you just write the function, it doesn't mean it will get called. So you'll need to make a call to the function. So how do I call that function now? Help me. All that I'll do here is what? Just call that local function. Sorry. And you could try running this. So what would happen now here in this case? Would print the value of A, and then of course the local function. And display, of course, was calling that. I don't need to call display. I want to actually show you that local function. I've got the console.readline. And this is what you could do. Could we have changed the value in here? Could we have changed the value in here? Let's say plus A. What will happen now here in this case? Right.
101.
Instead of
101.
100, 101. Again. Yeah. So that works out here. So what if I print this value here again? Okay, what if I print this value here? Would I get 101? Would I get the 101? Initially it was 100, of course. I'm calling the local function. Would it change to 101?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes. All right. So what am I trying to show you out here? I'm just trying to show you that local functions can access a variable defined in the calling code. And there will be situations that we'll need as we go along where this feature is very, very handy. Are we clear on this? Achha, tell me what would happen now if I try printing it here. What do you think the output here would be?
100.
100. Okay. You can answer, okay? Don't just output. On line 75, what will be the output?
100.
100.
101, anybody?
Sir, 101.
Why 101?
So because value of A is changing completely, sir.
But when is it changing? It changes inside the function. Na? So have we called the function anywhere before that? Before line 75, are we calling the function anywhere?
No.
When is the, we have written the function, but when are we calling it?
So
When
76.
are we calling it? Line 76 is where we are calling it, right? So that's where it's changing. So before line 76, on line 75, what do you think the output would still be? Would you like to change your answer?
100.
So it will be 100.
It will
100.
be 100. Okay. Remember, the call is happening here. Call is happening here. Call is not happening here. Sagar, you have your mic with you?
Yes, sir.
So why are you chatting? I'm not a chat person. I'm a call person. All right. Call me. All right. Are we clear on this, everybody? So the
Yes,
point
sir.
I'm making here, of course, now let's quickly check it out. It does give you 100 out here for the first one, and then inside the function itself, it was 101. So just writing the function first does not mean it's getting called. Only when you call the function, it gets called. All right. Yeah. Questions, if any?
So can this function be called outside main?
Yeah, and just coming to that, I was just copy pasting some code. So local functions can be defined within another function. It can only be called from the outer function where it's been defined. So where have we defined it? It's defined inside main. So now only main can call it. No other code can call it. So wherever you've defined it, that's where it can be called. Something else that we just saw, local functions can access variables defined in the outer function. We just saw that we could access A. And this is implicitly private. What do I mean by the word implicitly private? Implicitly as opposed to explicitly. What does the word implicitly mean?
By default.
By default.
Yeah. By default, it's taking it as private. Now, which means if you are saying that it is implicitly private, that means you cannot explicitly go and give it anything. Meaning I can't give it an access whisper. I can't even do this. I can't even do this. I'm trying to make it explicitly private. You understand? So I cannot do that because this is implicitly private. Are you clear on this? So these are some of the things that you need to keep track of in local functions. Questions, if any?
Variable inside local function can be accessible in outer function.
I could not hear you clearly. Can you please repeat what you said?
Variable inside local function can be accessible to the outer function.
So let's try doing this. But his question is int I equal to 100. And what is the problem here? Okay, I is already there. So int j is equal to 100. And what he wants to do is console.writeLine j. So do you think this would work? Right? What is the scope of this? Scope of this is related to these curly brackets only. Whereas the scope of this is everything inside this curly bracket. So if you notice, this inner thing is in the outside thing. But whatever is there in the inner thing obviously will not be available to the outside. All right. So good questions. I like these questions. Keep them coming and don't trust me with my answer. Supposing I didn't show it to you here. I didn't show you that. And I said no. So do you trust me? Yes. Sir. You should not. How many days since you have met me? You just, that too not in person, virtually on a meeting. So don't you dare trust me. I will give you any answer, but you have to check out on your own. Huh? I will try not to lie to you, but how do you know whether what I'm saying is right or wrong? You have to test it out. You have to, play around with the code, have fun with it. All right. So anyway, so we were just trying out functions out here in .NET. We've tried out a few things. We've tried overloading functions. We have tried, default parameters. We have tried positional parameters while calling functions, name parameters, and of course, right now we have tried out local functions. All right. So I think that's enough for today in terms of, it won't take you too long to try this out. But do try these out. So I'll share my code with you. Just give me a minute while I, share my code. I'll create a folder in my all right. So that's the folder that I have shared. If you can just try accessing it right now. Of course, it doesn't have anything, but I'll soon upload files out there. You can just try accessing that folder and see whether you have access to it. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So keep that handy, keep that shared. I am ending the session here now. I'm ending the sort of examples that I'm taking with you. So here's what I want you all to do. I am uploading one, I'll upload that PPT that somebody wanted to give us that PPT. So I'll give you that PPT. I am uploading an ebook